Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Carrot Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 1999 superhero comedy movie titled Mystery Men. Now, Mystery Men runs for 2 hours and 2 minutes long. Maybe 2 minutes, maybe 2 hours too long. No, just joking. It is directed by Kinka Usher, who, by the way, this is his only movie he ever directed. Prior to that and afterwards to that, he was directing commercials. He loved to direct his 1 minute long commercials, but hey, the guy was making a lot of money for it. And I guess he kind of felt that after Mystery Men, he decided he wasn't going to direct another movie again, and that he was going to go back to his comfort zone, directing commercials with low budget actors instead of super ego inflated, narcissistic condescension assholes. Yes, after directing Mystery Men, which went through lots of production hell, he decided, fuck it, I'm going back to my commercials. This is a one time deal, and I'm not doing it again, and I'm not looking back. The script was written by Neil Cuthbert. It is actually based off of the Flying Carrot comics by Bob Burden. Only the thing is the Flying Carrot is not present in this movie. But however, a few characters from the Flying Carrot comics did make its way into the movie Mystery Men. I believe they were Mr. Furious, the Shoveler, and Dr. Heller. Those were the only three characters that came out of the Flying Carrot comics. It is produced by Lawrence Gordon, Lloyd Levin, and Mike Richardson. It is composed by Stephen Warbeck, the cinematography by Stephen Burham, and it was edited by Conrad Buff. And we have quite the all-star lineup, which made up for quite the toxic environment, especially among the co-stars. There was a lot of egos clashed that came into this movie, where everybody wanted their respective roles to gain some level of significance. That somehow there was a lot of conflict as to how this movie was going to go, like the flow of the story. Unfortunately, this movie was quite off-putting, but somehow it still managed to work on high levels of entertainment. But it was mostly thanks to this all-star lineup, which consists of Ben Stiller, William H. Macy, Hank Azaria, Kel Mitchell, rest in peace, Paul Reubens, Janeane Garofalo, Greg Kinnear, Geoffrey Rush, Claire Forlani, Lena Olin, Wes Studi, Tom Waits, Eddie Izzard, Artie Lange, the great magician Ricky Jay, Louise Lasser, Jennifer Lewis, Prakazrel Michel, Ned Bellamy, Joel McCrary, Goodie Mob, plus also some appearances from Corbin Bleu, Philip Bolden, TV personality Ricky Ratzman, the great director-producer Michael Bay, Mark Mothersbaugh was a composer, back then unknown Sung Kang. We have comic legend Dane Cook, Doug Jones, Vincent Bauman, and Dana Gould. The first 45 minutes into the superhero spoof Mystery Men was nothing more than just an overlong introduction to the characters after a not so successful battle that took place at an old folks' home. So here we have a bunch of geriatric people frolicking around, dancing, trying to stay afloat with their walkers and wheelchairs. No, I'm not making fun, but this is a lighthearted comedy movie. When all of a sudden their party was interrupted by an evildoer who simply goes by the name of Big Red, played by Artie Lange and his gang of Red Eyes. We were probably expecting some top of the line superheroes, but instead we end up getting those other guys. Those who will probably work for apples and pears. We got Mr. Furious, played by Ben Stiller, whose power is his anger. Even though even though his anger doesn't necessarily mean shit. He's just a guy who just feels that his powers are when he throws a tantrum, when he goes unhinged, when he flares up and his face becomes red. Wait a minute. I have a temper. I can sometimes go unhinged. Where's my superpowers? But nonetheless, that's Mr. Furious for you. And I guess if any short tempered individual like him could have a superpower, why not the rest of us volatiles? But I guess he that's his powers. His powers is not taking anger management. And then we got a guy named the Shoveler, played by William H. Macy, whose talent is, well, shoveling. He says he's the best shoveler of all time. He's practically himself a legend in his own mind, even though his wife debunks his shoveling ability, saying you may be a good shoveler, but you're no superhero. And his weapon of choice is the shovel. So he's the son of Old Man Marley from Home Alone. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, the shoveler. His actual, at least it's good to know they got a bit of a backstory. I mean, Ben Stiller's character works in a scrapyard with a curmudgeon old geezer as his boss. The shoveler, I guess, he works in a coal mine. And, hey, he's a white guy married to a black woman. And he's got mixed race children. Anyhow, that's besides the point. Anyhow, yeah. I believe I know Mr. Furious's actual first name is Roy. I believe the shoveler's name is Eddie. And then we got a strange individual who goes by the name of the Blue Raja, who sports a turban and why is he even called the Blue Raja when he doesn't have anything blue about him? He doesn't wear anything blue for himself to be called the Blue Raja. Except that he wears a turban, speaks with the Queen's British accent, even though he's actually American. And he's got the ability of wielding kitchen cutlery. Forks, spoons, but no knives. So, anyways, they struggle against the supervillain Big Red and his gang of Red Eyes in a deliberate, poorly choreographed fight scene where these loser superhero wannabes were at the edge of defeat until a more believable superhero named Captain Amazing, played by Kinnear, saved the day, putting another villain in his place. Captain Amazing is kind of, I guess you could say, a knockoff of many other superheroes whose superpowers comes from his suit and his arsenal. So in other words, he's practically almost like Batman and Tony Stark. It's their suit that gives them powers. Oh yeah, and even he also has an alter ego as a PR executive who goes by the name of Lance Hunt. And the difference between Captain Amazing and Lance Hunt is that, well, Lance Hunt wears glasses, which is used as a punchline. You know, hey. So in other words, that if Superman put on a pair of glasses and wore a suit and tie, nobody can see that Clark Kent is really Superman. Not trying to sound like a whiner, but that cold intro practically went on far too long and very awkward in its premise. Sure, I know it was played for comedy. Sure, I know that these superhero characters in this movie are a bunch of losers. And that the only one who actually has some level of credence to their psyche is Captain Amazing. And even Captain Amazing himself has some flaws, which I will get into very shortly. But because the action starts without really getting us invested into the characters, there was very little room for character introduction. But then once they discover that Captain Amazing has unleashed a malicious and dangerous foe named Casanova Frankenstein, played by Academy Award winning actor Geoffrey Rush, who's taking Champion City by storm. Champion City is practically almost the equivalent to Metropolis, Gotham City, you name it. Pretty much inner city USA. These pathetic excuses of a superhero need more weirdo vigilantes to take him down. Now, the reason why Casanova Frankenstein was brought back into his line of evil is because apparently Captain Amazing is an egotistical douche. Apparently, this is all just a public relation endorsement, so to speak. He's not doing it for bravado or adulation. He's doing it for public relation purposes, sponsorships. I mean, he has castor oil as one of his sponsors. Yeah, Pennzoil Oil is also sponsored him. And Pepsi is sponsoring him as well. Well, that was until his bravado has suddenly been taken a bit of a downward spiral. Fearing that he has taken out all the supervillains in Champion City, Captain Amazing feels like people are just gonna forget about him and he'll be just nothing more than another loser, pathetic excuse for a superhero vigilante. He's gonna fall down the same denominators as Mr. Furious, the Shoveler, and the Blue Raja. Fearing that he still wants to be like the top superhero of Champion City, he decides to do not exactly a heroic scheme, but more like a public relations scheme to help win back his popularity. So he unleashes one of his more notorious villains. Since all the other villains are either dead, serving long term life sentences in jail, or just or perpetually institutionalized. So he brings back his old nemesis, Casanova Frankenstein, a notorious criminal villain, back into the fold. Just so that he can regain his popularity and once again continue to fight off evil. But however, though, his plan backfires once he thinks that he and Casanova Frankenstein can work up a deal, and you think that after nearly 25 years of being institutionalized, that Casanova Frankenstein has rejuvenated himself? Do you think that he's learned from his mistakes? Do you think that he's rectified his problems and is now going to be an upstanding citizen? Forget it! It's not happening. It's not happening. No. He is practically just picking up where he started. He is back to his old mansion, working on inventions, including something called the Franculator, which will turn your body into stone and it'll send you to your death. Which is exactly what he did to Captain Amazing. Well, first he kidnaps him and ties him to a chair. And then we see later on what his secret weapon can do and the impact it has. So Mr. Furious, the Shoveler, and the Blue Raja call upon more weirdo vigilantes to try to take down this devilish fiend. So they call up a character named Invisible Boy, played by Kel Mitchell, who becomes invisible when no one is looking. In other words, his secret powers is the equivalent to the light in the refrigerator. We also have another character who goes by the name of the Bowler, played by Janeane Garofalo, who has a crystal bowling ball, and inside that bowling ball is the skull of her late father, Carmine, who was killed by the by the Disco Boys, who work as assistants to Casanova Frankenstein. These are some hip guys whose mindset has never left the 70s. They live off of disco music, and even though disco has been long dead since the early 80s, they feel that disco is still living. One of them, I think, is Tony C, or was it Tony P, played by comedian Eddie Izzard. Anyhow, yeah. So the Bowler's purpose really is to try to take down the Disco Boys and to get revenge on them for killing her father, whose skull and I believe is is inside the crystal bowling ball, and apparently Daddy Carmine can still communicate with her. But of course, my personal favorite superhero vigilante of all, and God rest his soul, Pee Wee Herman himself, Paul Reubens. He plays practically one of my favorite characters in this movie. And of course, we're talking about the spleen. Yes, whose secret weapon will surely blow your mind, as well as it'll surely blow from other parts of his body, but it will surely blow your mind just as much as it blows out of his ass. Yes, he has the ability to really let it out. Yes, why not? I mean, I've seen a whole slew full of weirdo wannabe superheroes. Why not a guy whose secret weapon is his farts? Yes, this guy is really runs on gas. And I mean human gas. His secret weapon is human gas coming straight right from the ass. Yeah, don't let him stand near a fire, because it might ignite. But my God, whenever Pee Wee Herman comes on, he just really, really shines in this role. I mean, he lights up whenever I see him. I mean, he truly. I mean, Paul Reubens has made a lifetime of himself playing these almost like cartoony like characters. Here is no exception. I mean, the guy looks hideous, but I think he was meant to look like that. But oh my goodness, I got a lot to say about Pee Wee Herman, Paul Reubens in this movie because my God, I loved him as the spleen. I think easily aside from Pee Wee Herman, the spleen is another favorite character of mine from Paul Reubens, and I don't think anybody could have done it better. Let's face it. I mean, Paul Reubens is just naturally a talented actor when it comes to comedy. After several years being a member of the 1980s troupe, the Groundlings, he emerged into the scene playing very memorable comical characters, especially the neurotic man child, Pee Wee Herman. Reubens made Pee Wee his own character and became a staple in the 80s on Saturday mornings on CBS, Pee Wee's Playhouse, which ran from 1986 to 1991. And he had a lot of exposure. He launched a few movies with uh, Pee Wee Herman, including Pee Wee's Big Adventure, Big Time Pee Wee. I believe he also had a cameo appearance in one of those beach movies that starred Frankie Avalon and Annette Funicello. I think it was actually one of their last beach movies. He was in there and he was doing the surfer bird. And let's face it, he was pretty much everywhere. But then Reubens kind of like kept quite a bit of a low profile since the infamous 1991 Innocent, which had him arrested because he went to an adult porn theater and was caught jerking off. Yes, he got arrested for that. His show was canceled, and he eventually ended up getting a lot of bad publicity. There was, of course, also accusations of him being a pedophile, but even all of that was was acquitted. There was no real concrete evidence that to convict that he actually ever performed such heinous acts. But but personally in this movie, Mystery Men, Reubens is the best character to come out of Mystery Men, with Janeane Garofalo's the bowler coming a close second with her deadpan one-liners. And once they enter the fray, it makes up for the overlong, awkward scene at the nursing home. I truly enjoyed both of their performances very well. The bowler, although is a lot different from the other characters, being that she tries to stay a level of more normalcy. I mean, the only thing she wanted was just to get even with the the disco boys and to go back to graduate school. I mean, she comes across as being a little bit more smarter than the rest of the other characters, and she's not as blue collar as the rest of these other low discount superheroes. I mean, I loved the scene where they were doing sort of like an audition for a sixth member, and there was all kinds of these weird guys with weird superpowers and weird weaponry. I mean, we had a character who went by the name of the Waffler, played by comedian Dane Cook, whose secret weapon was a waffler, and he apparently also has deadly syrup. And then we had Pencilhead and Son of Pencilhead, whose job was to erase the crime in Champion City. And like I mentioned before, wasn't there once a villain in Batman that was also called Pencilhead? Yeah. I mean, this villain in the Pencilhead in the Batman comics is one of the more rare villains going out there. He's not like up there with top line criminals like the Joker and Penguin and Catwoman and the Riddler and so on. No, he's pretty much around the same characters as Father Time, Killer Croc, Maxi Priest, and Professor Pig. You know, lame, cheesy, obscure Batman villains. There were other ones too, including PMS Girl or the PMS Avenger, who only works four times a month. You got a problem with that? No. You also have Squeegee Man, who's ready to ring out the crime in Gotham. Oh, and it'll also give you a free car, a free window wash. These guys just want to be famous, so they come up with lame. So they come up with lame superhero powers. And of course, in order for them to up their ante, they of course need to have the help from a trained professional. And even he's a bit of a weirdo himself, who goes by the name of the Sphinx, played by Studi, who speaks with incoherent words of wisdom, but also has the ability to split guns in half with his own mind. And then you also have Tom Waits, who's almost like the Q, almost like the James Bond character Q, who creates gadgets and weaponry. Oh yeah, and he also rents chickens. And of course, he's played by another wacky comedic actor, singer, musician by the name of Tom Waits. So, you know, this movie is just one complete 2 hours of utter weirdness. And they all tell me I'm peculiar. I understand the formula of how a spoof superhero movie operates. Unlike the traditional tropes to an underdog story, you get these people who haven't got a chance at winning against their toughest challenges. So these guys probably couldn't even fight their way out of a paper bag. But their most reliable leader is put in a precarious situation, but it's up to the scrap that gather the team and the courage to work their way up to become more confident fighters until we get to the climax where they give it everything they got until the villain is finally defeated. Now, I've seen these movies many times before, but unlike the barrage of superheroes that has come into theaters in the last 2 decades, starting, with X-Men, well, of course, you also had the Batman movies from the late 80s, well until 1997, Mystery Man refrains from taking itself seriously. So it's kind of like up around the ranks of character superheroes like Deadpool and Shazam, which are also basically based off of comedy superhero characters. And this movie actually bombed at the box office pretty badly, unfortunately. But I think that if they would have been released, like, let's say, maybe around the late 2000s, early 2010s, maybe they would have fared a lot better. I think basically the fault was that they were way ahead of its time. I mean, let's face it, I think I would enjoy this movie a little bit more than Watchmen, where the Watchmen actually do take themselves way too seriously. But Mystery Man isn't really about superhero vigilantism, but more like comedy based off of being a superhero. There is no underlying message or morals in this movie. I mean, I guess the closest would be to if you feel confident in yourself and you feel that you need to if you feel confident in yourself if you feel confident in yourself, I guess it basically just centers around being confident in yourself. There you go. I don't know if I can just further elaborate. I guess that's kind of being blunt. But yeah, that's short but to the point. Be happy with the skin you own, be confident in yourself, and never give up the good fight. There. I know that sounds cliche, but I guess that was probably what the moral of this movie is. But it's basically just a bunch of performers having fun with their roles and entertaining its masses. Even though maybe on the screen they look like they were having fun, but I've heard that there was a lot of kerfuffle off camera. So I've heard. I'm not going to further elaborate, but there was a lot of conflict that was happening. Almost to a point where a lot of these actors and actresses do not work with each other ever again. What was equally awkward to the badly exhibited nursing home battle was when short tempered Mr. Furious, shovel bashing the shoveler and cutlery manipulator, the Blue Raja, start recruiting new superheroes to join them in their epic encounter against Casanova Frankenstein. There are a whole group of weirdos wanting in on the group, such as the Waffler, whose weapon of choice is table syrup and is not afraid to use it on bad guys. Pencilhead and his son, Pencilhead Jr., whose mission is to erase crime. And there's this PMS girl who will only work 4 days a month if you have a problem with that. This scene is strange as it seems. Oh, I forgot about the whole cat fight scene between two women dressed up as Wonder Woman. That was actually pretty funny. But once they get the team assembled, they're ready to take on the forces of evil, as they are joined, of course, by their mentor, who goes by the name of the Sphinx, who's like a father figure to them, and trains them, making Champion City into a crime free metropolis. And with the help of gadgets expert Dr. Heller, played by Tom Waits, who makes non lethal weapons for our heroes, they are willing to take down evil and overcome the dangers that come with the mission. I mean, sure, some people could say it felt like an overlong origin story. It is an origin story, but unfortunately, this was a one time deal, as we did not get any sequels because it bombed so badly in the box office. But however, it did reach the level of being a cult favorite. If there was ever a character in the group that could embark on their own adventures, if they ever actually had a spin off, I know this might not seem popular among a lot of people, but I would love to have seen the Spleen get his own spin off. I mean, to tell you the truth, having the Spleen in his own spin off would definitely be a blast of air. And Paul Reubens was the perfect choice for that. I mean, a guy who could let out deadly gas bombs through his asshole. Well, nobody can do it better. And let's face it, let's face it, we'd be just pretty much laughing on the floor at all, and we'd be just rolling into the theaters, laughing our asses off every bit as much as the Spleen lets them out. Yeah. Oh, yes. Whereas in the COVID 19 pandemic, toilet paper was the hot commodity off the grocery shelves. If the Spleen was to make his own movie, I suppose clothespins would be the hottest things off the shelf. Or just anything to pinch your nostrils so you don't get the deadly air coming from his ass pipes. People may say that the film was too cartoony. Well, it was meant to be that way. I'm not saying it was perfect, I'm not saying it was Shakespeare, but what superhero movie ever really was? Reubens spent most of his acting career playing cartoon like characters, like Pee Wee Herman. But here is the Spleen, he's equally as cartoony here. He has that pimply skin that might be unattractive, but I guess if he's the Spleen, he's not meant to look like Fabio. He's meant to be unattractive. I mean, face it. Farting is not an attractive thing. Letting out air isn't gonna win you crowds. And at least he has a little bit of a backstory of why he became the spleen. It was because one time he went to a carnival gypsy and he farted and he blamed it on a gypsy woman who placed a curse on him, which causes him to suffer from uncontrollable gas or deadly gas. But now he's taking that curse and using it as a weapon to fight evil. If I were you, I'd probably let him stay away from the bean chili. But hey, good looks have never defeated evil. I mean, not all not all superheroes are dashing, handsome, or attractive. I mean, look at the Thing from the Fantastic Four. I mean, he's basically just a big giant pile of rocks. What about the Incredible Hulk? There's nothing attractive about the Incredible Hulk. He's just a big giant green monster like individual. And then you have, of course, you have all kinds of other. I mean, if you sometimes wonder if the super villains are a bunch of weirdos. Well, who says superheroes aren't any more sane either? They're probably just as destructive and weird as the villains. And sometimes you even sometimes wonder who is the more or less of two evils, whether you're a superhero vigilante or a super villain. I mean, the spleen also wears loud, flashy clothes with rotten looking teeth and has a speech impediment that rivals Daffy Duck, where every time he says things with an F is saturated with high amounts of slobber going for it. Yes, he talks that way too. His weapon of choice might run on gas, however, it doesn't need to be charged. He just has the natural ability to control his own farts. Let's just say if he had his own spin off, you'll likely pass out once you get a whiff of the aroma. Yes, I know I've been telling a lot of fart jokes, but let's face it, Mystery Men just seems to get better whenever the spleen is on screen, if you know what I mean. And though the movie never fails to keep you entertained in every scene that's available, it will provide you with many laughs the whole way through. The opening scene probably may have went on too long with very little in terms of character development, but once we get introduced to newer characters, things start to settle down for the better. And though Reubens may have fallen from grace after his untimely arrest, and now that he's no longer with us anymore, rest in peace, Pee Wee Herman. And wherever you are, I hope it's a better place. It was nice that he was able to redeem himself, as we were happy to see this comedic legend breeze through in this fascinating role that'll have us running to the nearest clothespin. So, in a way, this movie was a bit of a dedication in the memory of Paul Reubens, aka Pee Wee Herman. But I'm not. But I actually thought this movie was far from perfect. There was a lot of flaws, but it was still entertaining in its own. And though it was a shame that it bombed at the box office and that Kinka Usher never made another movie again, and that a lot of egos clashed during the making of this movie, it still was a fine, wonderful movie, and I highly recommend if you're into superhero movies that don't take itself very seriously. So, in all that said and done, if I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, I would give Mystery Men from 1999 a 7.5 out of 10. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my YouTube channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember the 3 simple rules. Be kind, be courteous, and please refrain from any rude comments. And I'll be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Corrupt Writer saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.